Asad and I are back from COP28. He's in Kuala Lumpur. I'm back home in Hong Kong. And it was a productive COP28 for us. I hope it's been as productive for those people who are deciding our fate with the um, government policies that are going to come out, and whether they're going to actually do something about reducing emissions or not. Well, that's in their hands. At our level, we have done our best to um, do what we are good at COP28, and that was to explain about digitization, how it can help in the process of emission reduction. So when we were there, I got an opportunity to speak about digital measurement, verification, and reporting at an excellent forum that the Global Carbon Council had arranged for us. And we touched upon digital verification, we touched upon carbon registries. And now, Asad, what's left and what we didn't discuss in COP28 is your new initiative on green financing. So you want to tell us something about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's a natural progression of, I think, where we've headed in this journey to sort of find the pain points in the carbon marketplace and solve them. Just to quickly recap, we started off really with, I always call it the Russian doll sort of analogy when I explain what we do. And the core of our, Russian doll is the digital platform that we created to, look at different asset classes that are not in the carbon marketplace, like power, emissions-based, commercial facilities, et cetera, and bring them in by providing them a easy-to-use, simple, digitized platform that can take data from source, can process it in compliant fashion, can report it, verify, and validate it, all along the lines of the approved methodologies. And that's the core of the Verdana platform. That's what we built from day one. And then we realized, as we started deploying this in the market, as we started approaching users with it, they're like, hey, well, wouldn't this be interesting if it could also do additional things for us? Since you do this part so efficiently, can you also efficiently connect us to registries that then can hand our project or our data over to standard bodies so that we can get it certified, so that these credits can be issued on ledgers? How about that? Interestingly, as we found out, not being people from the carbon trade, so to speak, we didn't spend the last 20 years in this business. We came from different industries, from telecoms and banking and venture. And so we had a different perspective, perhaps. And we said, yeah, that sounds very reasonable. I think that's exactly what we should do. And the marketplace said, no, you can't do that. That's not how it's done. It has to be compartmentalized and has to be handed over by different service providers, shuffling, all of this paper from one desk to another. And it just seemed to me that was, an extremely inefficient way of doing things. So the last episode, you and Geeta talked about EcoConsortium, and EcoConsortium was the second Russian doll around our value proposition, which is that we took this digital platform that we had for reporting and verification, and we extended it into a system integrated solution with other service providers, namely registry bodies, standards, the ledgers upon which registries are the carbon credit are issued, and interconnecting that into marketplaces like exchanges. And that provides what we call a sort of turnkey solution. And an aptly named EcoConsortium. We built a consortium around which we were able to give a sort of hand-holding from the asset owner down through the various steps of preparing that information, of creating a methodology that maximizes the credits that come out of that process, of reporting and verifying that, of handing it over to a registry, of finding a standards body that can certify it, of issuing it on a ledger, handing it to a marketplace. So that I think was a neat trick. I like to say that we built a nice mousetrap with that solution, and by digitizing it, we made it, cheap, easily accessible, scalable, transparent, all the good things that digital solutions should offer. And so, we built a nice mousetrap with that. And now really what we're doing is we're looking for mice, we're looking for, someone said when we were in COP that, hey, you have a nice mousetrap and I have the New York City subway system. So that's really, that segues us into the third Russian doll, which is the big one. And this, this is a fairly ambitious arena for us to throw our hat into, which is the carbon finance marketplace. Why carbon finance? How did we end up in this space, and why are we, heading in that direction? Well, logically, if we're trying to take, our solutions and extend them across the value chain, upstream to downstream, or as I like to call it, in the full cycle of the trade, then if I'm the one collecting data, if I'm the one processing that data, if that entire crediting process goes on or rides on my digital rails where I have full line of sight, then it did occur to us that, well, we might be the best ones to actually price that, for the asset owner. We know where the data is coming from. We know where it's going. We know it's hand holding it. We know what time, how much time it takes. We know exactly how the fulfillment of that is happening over a period of time. So we can go back and say, why don't we also acquire these carbon credits at source and therefore, complete the cycle of the carbon trade? Let me pause on that for a bit to let you reflect and comment, and then we can take this discussion a bit further.
No, so so the three, like your Russian dolls, are the whole digitization of the urban setting, from where carbon credits can be extracted. So that's what you've done, really. I mean, commercial buildings, EVs, street lighting, rooftop solar, um, fuel switching, everything distinctly different from nature-based solutions. So all those assets you've created an asset class there, of carbon credits, but with digital guardrails, which can connect to the carbon ecosystem by being connected to the EcoConsortium carbon registry, carbon platform. And now you're saying that whole ecosystem this whole platform you've created, and the uh, commercial asset class of carbon credits that it generates, you can also arrange for financing the projects that would require the emission reduction to go down to generate these carbon credits, and then acquire those carbon credits and sell them. So would that be a correct interpretation of what you said?
Yeah, let's get into that actually. But let me start by saying a couple of things. And that might even establish our credentials for why we're trying to, solve a problem as large as this. First of all, as you can see from COP, and as we see from the multiple press releases, newspaper articles, coverage that comes out from the space, carbon is at the heart of the climate change conversation. And within carbon, the creation of an efficient marketplace around that is really the debate as to whether or not this is the right asset class around which to build a scalable solution. And some of the best and most eminent minds in this industry, are all debating this openly and amongst themselves and in public forums. I think it's, apart from COP, I think you and I have reflected upon, the proliferation of climate change conferences over the last year. You can throw a stone and hit one on the head, it seems, and even though you and I haven't really crisscrossed the world like many of the other participants are, I think we've ended up in at least 10 different locations over the course of the year trying to solve this carbon or this climate change problem by doing what? By by adding to it, I suppose, in some way. So we really have to find a solution if we're going to put all this energy into it. And as I said, some of the best minds in the business are indeed trying to do that. So why us? Well, one thing that occurred to me right at the outset a couple of years ago when we launched Verdana as a venture was that the carbon marketplace didn't function like most efficient marketplaces do. I mean, I came from the, equity and derivatives marketplaces. I used to trade equities for and derivatives for Citibank and Daiwa and Macquarie Bank for. And so I kind of know what a marketplace or what an efficient marketplace should look like. And it seemed very apparent to me that that's not what the carbon marketplace looks like. It's an OTC marketplace primarily, where there's very little price discovery, there's very little transparency, there's not much liquidity. It's also bottlenecked by a couple of dominant bodies that dictate the flow of carbon credits that make it to the marketplace, and again, dictated by a small number of very large consumers that buy those carbon credits. And to some extent, that's not a coincidence that all of it has happened this way. It's by design. There's a reason why big asset classes like nature-based carbon sinks and reforestation programs and agricultural programs, which generate a large number of credits over a long period of time. There's a reason why they have been engineered to create offset solutions for very large purchasers of carbon credits. And that's what I like to call the sort of Savile Row Tailors Club of the carbon trade or the carbon marketplace. It's certainly a very highly engineered product. It's got nice fat margins in it. It's it's traded in the back room without much public scrutiny, sort of a black box, if you will. And it caters to the interests of a small number of large players. Well, if they're the Savile Row Tailors Club, I think what we're trying to do with our digitized, standardized, templatized, accessible, cheap, scalable solutions is they're the Savile Row Tailors Club, we're the H&M of the business. We want to make a cheap, easily accessible, scalable product, right? So that's a fundamental difference in mindset. If you do that, what happens? Well, you bring in many new participants into the marketplace that are currently excluded from it. You also make it much more scalable, much more accessible, much more transparent. And therefore, over a period of time, these type of initiatives will create more price discovery, transparency, liquidity, and therefore broaden the carbon marketplace. So that is the problem that we're trying to solve. And in doing so, we have targeted large verticals that generate emissions, CO2 emissions, that are largely absent from the carbon marketplace. The nature-based projects are dominant in the marketplace. The commercial facilities, as we call it, but really the power emissions-based projects are largely absent from the marketplace. And why is that? Well, on one hand, power-based emissions are far easier to track, manage, and quantify, because the reporting comes from a much simpler set of data. You're basically getting power emissions data from smart meters, from power management systems, building management systems, and other tools that are already in place. The infrastructure is already in place. So the engineering is a lot easier, and therefore, we're able to monitor, manage, and report on that in a much more efficient way. And because of that, it's probably going to be a lot cheaper to do that. It's probably going to have a lot less margins in it. And to make that entire asset class include that entire asset class into this marketplace, one has to create this sort of accessible platform that we have done so.
Just a quick point here. When you say that the power based um, asset, the power-based credits are not in the marketplace. They are not in the carbon credit marketplace, but they are there in the IREC marketplace. Just to make that quick little clarification, they're not. But you're absolutely right. It's not that they aren't there in the marketplace. It's just that the predominance of activity is in nature-based for a variety of reasons. Many of them right. However, the fact remains that in the process, as you laid out, urban settings are neglected. Now, for example, there was a World Bank report which shows that potentially Ho Chi Minh City can generate 44 million carbon credits annually from the urban setting, which is with the commercial, everything that we connect into commercial facilities, the electric vehicles, charging stations, rooftop solar, fuel switching, all of that aggregated over a year to 44 million. So that actually addresses a question someone asked me, like, why are people? I mean, are people into nature-based solutions and neglecting urban emissions as a source of carbon credits because you get more bang for the buck out of the nature-based solutions? And the answer is no. The reason is that though in the nature-based side, we have all learned to aggregate intelligently, whereas the aggregation is not taking place in the urban-based settings. But it's almost similar. The way the process works. So you outlined the differences between nature-based and commercial settings, but there are a lot of similarities. The process in nature-based, which is the project owner who owns the land holding, then connects to the project developer, who arranges the green finance, and then acquires the carbon credits, and then arranges to have them sold to the offset buyer. Their whole process is the same here. It's not any different. The only thing missing up till now is the aggregation, which now our platform does. So now you can, once aggregated, if you look at the 9,000 square kilometers Ho Chi Minh City, from what I recall, if that generates 44 million carbon credits, I think an equal amount of nature-based location project would approximately generate the same. It's not any different. Arguably the urban setting would generate more. So the question was, someone asked me, was why? Well, why are people focused on nature-based? Well, one is we should be. Very frankly, nature-based is important. I mean, preserving those rainforests are important. Reducing methane from rice, retransplantation is important. But on the other hand, you can't ignore the urban landscape. You just can't. And we are not. No one is saying one versus the other. It's just that one needs to also look at this asset class, and we are opening up a new door for people to take advantage of this asset class, along with nature-based. Actually, one I don't know who it was, a very enlightened American LP for a green fund said that he's dividing his holdings into 4 quadrants: nature-based, the commercial assets like ours, and then of course the other third one was, yes, carbon sequestration and renewable. So these are all complementary initiatives urgently needed, especially given the fact that, again, in this COP, they have kicked the can down the road to the next COP. So those guys up there, the big fellas, are not going to do much. And it's left to all of us to do what we can. And people criticize the carbon credit mechanism, saying it's too commercial, the bankers are involved, it doesn't take into account, it's more become an end in itself rather than being a means. And some of that may be true, some of it may be true. But the fact is, you tell me, given the fact that the powers that be have come to zero agreement on emission reduction, this COP. In fact, the word emission reduction or whatever has been removed from the final communique. And they're talking about methane reduction, but then there are no safeguards to it. So the countries have said we're going to reduce the oil producing countries have said they'll reduce the methane in the oil production. Okay, which is brilliant, right? But where are the safeguards? Where is the enforcement mechanism? Not there, right? So it is safe to say by the time the next COP happens in Azerbaijan, there won't be much happening in the department. So it's left to us guys to use finance. So it is an incentive. Of course, people make money from this. And as a result of that, emissions get reduced. And we are offering the digital guardrails to make sure that emissions do actually get reduced. And the point is that I just want to make a quick point, and I lumbered on, was that we are not, the process in place here is not any different from the one which is there for nature-based solutions.
And the digital guardrails is that you refer to, allows us to do a few things. The outcome, I think, is interesting. So here are two or three things that that I wanted to point out as to what makes this what makes targeting this asset class interesting, and why I think it can yield a very interesting commercial facilities sort of carbon finance model, as we call it. We call it CF2, Commercial Facilities Carbon Finance. So number one, as you said, it's a very big asset class. So 40% of all CO2 emissions that actually come out from power-based emissions from commercial facilities, from which are data centers and office buildings and residential complexes, and as we look at that as an aggregated asset class, that being absent from the marketplace is really inexcusable. It's a problem one has to solve, and we're having a go at it. Underlying those commercial facilities are also infrastructural assets that are fundamentally the same in terms of the emissions that are generated from it, which are, for example, the grid system, including upgradations in that grid system to improve efficiencies into smart grids, cities, and upgradations into cities, into planning for sustainability and other optimal advantages like smart cities. So when you look at those as asset classes, they become very large addressable segments, no less than the NBS segment, no less than many of the other jumbo asset classes that the large industry buyers are targeting. There is one difference in this, which is what I was trying to get to in my last point. The difference in ours is that while there is a great deal of engineering and complexity that goes into calculating, tracking, and generating the carbon credit bank that comes from for a forested asset or a reforesting asset or a nature-based asset, there is a certain elegance and simplicity that comes from the power emissions-based asset class that is the large category. I mean, it's the large constituent of this entire category, right? Because the information is collected, it's reported, and it's calculated in a fairly consistent and compliant fashion, which is trackable live all the time, as opposed to looking at something on an intermittent analog basis. This is something that's digital, live and accessible at any time. That allows us to do a very important thing. The big problem in the carbon finance marketplace is that carbon credits as an asset class certainly are going to grow. I think there's no debate around that, because whether it's the compliant or the voluntary market, the projects are entering into it to take advantage of the ability to monetize the investments and the upgradations they're making in whatever processes they have, so that they can claim those carbon credits against them. They can offset it against their own emissions. They can offset it against their current and future carbon credit taxes, or they can just monetize it. Their activity, their investments can be monetized by carbon credits generated, right? The problem with that is that carbon credits are generated over a period of time, and the price of carbon credits will change over that period of time. And today, the carbon credit finance mechanism is largely taking into account that carbon credit market risk. Now, nobody wants that market risk. Well, when I say nobody wants that market risk, I'm like, none of the usual suspects, banks, insurance companies, large lenders, they don't want that carbon credit risk. That's a risky asset class. Um, Last year, the value of, Vera's Red Plus credits were all over the place, and not in, the right direction, by the way. So if you look at December 2022 to 23, and you track the prices of, Red Plus credits, well, they haven't performed very well. So if you have a ETF that's composed of these credits, doesn't matter if your ETF is tracking the market. If your market's down 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, well, what are you going to do? You've taken a huge market risk on that. Insurance companies, banks, and other risk-adjusted based lenders don't want that risk. So what we can do with the commercial facilities asset class, because the inputs are far more trackable and transparent, because the output is it can be monitored on a live, ongoing basis. We are able to predict with a great deal more accuracy the number of carbon credits that will come down the pipe from such assets. And because we are able to do that, we then are also able to offset or to sell off those future carbon credits to purchasers, in a way that removes the carbon credit market risk out there. And that's a big, if we can accomplish that, or if that can be accomplished, that brings in many more participants into the carbon finance marketplace. Suddenly, insurance companies will be like, if this is a cost of capital investment where you're offsetting, the future carbon credits that are generated versus the future carbon credits that are sold, and we're doing it at an agreed pricing mechanism, and perhaps even putting an insurance wrapper around it so that we're reducing default risk, then that's something I could be very interested in. And banks, once that's standardized as a product, once it's made more accessible as a product, even banks can come into this asset class. So I think that's where we're heading with it. Commercial facilities allows us to do these two or three things in a way that's fundamentally different from the other asset classes that dominate the marketplace today.
I haven't. This is my question, not being a finance guy, is what type of institutions would back such a fund? So you're going to create the fund. This fund's going to go after aggregated carbon credits in two ways. The way I understood it, one is that you would just enter into let's say Marriott. They've got the whole aggregation of all the hotels. They've gone through emission reduction programs. They have reduced their footprint substantially. They have earned the carbon credits through additionality, or so they claim. That all those carbon credits, you then say, okay, once they get certified, I want to enter into a long-term 10-year contract with you, and these carbon credits will come to me, and I'll pay you for them. I'll pay you some money up front and some money with as the process goes down the various milestones. Now, that is one. The other one is an organization with a large footprint will say, I need funding for my emission reduction program, which will comply with additionality requirements. And then you will say, okay, I'll fund it. I'll give you the facility at preferential rates as long as I get the carbon credits. So all that is all very good. But in your fund, you're going to need a lot of money to draw down for large projects, right? Either to pay off a Marriott in advance, right? Or to finance something which could run into millions of dollars, but over a large footprint, which would generate significant number of carbon credits by the emission reduction that you finance, right? Where would who would be your, what's the word?
Yeah, where would the money come from?
Yeah, who would be your LPs for your fund? Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Well, the three broad categories, I think, of investors that would be interested in a platform like this or a product like this. So if you look back at my model, right, my model has, three different components to it in terms of how it generates, and each one of those components will be attractive to a certain type of investor. So the first component is that I am able to bid an asset owner for the carbon credits that he is going to generate from whichever compliant program that he is engaged in to reduce emissions or to remove emissions. That's the definition of creating carbon credits, right? So the first thing is I'm able to do that. And for that, there could be a buyer, the buyer of those assets, of the carbon credits that come from that entire process. And that is one type of investor. So that's largely the investor who's in the carbon credit marketplace today. But that investor needs to take a lot of risk because we don't know over a period of time what's going to happen to the value of that carbon credit. Could go up, can go down, can go up and down in a very volatile way. So there's a certain risk adjusted return that is required for that type of investor. Who would be that type of investor? Well, it could be hedge funds that are interested in carbon credits. It could be, family offices or institutional investors that want to build a portfolio of carbon credits. So that's one. The second part, which I think is quite unique in our model, and because of all the things we discussed and the nature of commercial facilities and the credits that emanate from them, is that because of the accuracy with which we can predict not only the delivery of those carbon credits, but also the volume of those carbon credits, because of the accuracy with which we can, take into account the processing cost and the processing timeline, because it all rides on our digital rails. Because of that, we have the confidence to forward purchase those carbon credits in a way that will be much more difficult for another fund to do with a different asset class. And once I forward purchase carbon credits, I can also forward sell those carbon credits and thereby become essentially a market maker of that pool of carbon credits, which I have a great deal of confidence in that will be delivered to me from the process.
So your forward, hold on. So this is a very important point, right? Your forward purchasing means you as a businessman, as a banker, will only forward purchase if there's enough mitigation of risk. And that risk mitigation is taking place because of the digital guardrails, which currently don't exist. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's taken because of the digital guardrails, as you call it, or just in layman's terms, we have digitized the whole process. So there's complete line of sight for us to see where it's coming from, how it gets processed, and how it gets delivered in a live, a real-time format, which doesn't exist in the carbon marketplace today. The carbon marketplace today is a black box. I'm an open box. That's why.
But again, if let's again follow the same process that the current marketplace follows. Okay, so just to wrap this thing up, let me explain what will happen here. So you have a large footprint. Let's just take the Ho Chi Minh project, World Bank's Ho Chi Minh project. Huge, large footprint, 9,000 square kilometers, 44 million potential carbon credits. So we then divide that area into quadrants, and each quadrant, there are multiple projects. All of them are aggregated, brought on the platform, and they can constitute commercial facilities, office buildings, residential buildings, electric vehicle charging stations, rooftop solar, and street lighting converted to LED. All these things, either aggregate them, together or separately, but these aggregated groups of carbon credits are now sent for processing to the certifying body. The fund then looks at these takes these projects, and the same way as South Pole would take a project, rainforest project, and package it, package it nicely, explain what the benefits of that project to the local community, how it's going to save on emissions, and then he will take that project to Chevron, he'll take the project to Shell, he'll take the project to a buyer of offsets, right? And the way the project comes across, the way it is presented, the way it actually reduces the emissions, all of that together actually will add up to what the carbon credit can be priced at, or what's the price the offset buyer is willing to pay. And from what I gather, this is exactly the same thing you'll do. You'll take those various projects, you will show how the digital guardrails are in place, and that there can be no hanky-panky because it's all audited. Now, of course, if someone refuses to audit it, you can't do anything about it, but it's auditable. The validator, verifier, standard body can all on their smartphone get the digital dashboards, and which they get data which can be audited right back to the source. So that is the package you will take to Shell and tell them, guys, here you have, uh, uh, or maybe one of your LPs who wants to offset. Here you have a project with digital guardrails, no hanky panky, no question of greenwashing. You know what? It's going to cost you a premium. And that is how this whole new asset class takes off. Uh, I just want you to give me a quick yes or no because we're going to wind this down. It's taken up quite a while. I don't know if I said it rightly. Just tell me if I was accurate in my assumption, in my explanation of your genius.
Yeah, well, it's right. I mean, I'll give you a very simple way of visualizing exactly what you said, which is that the process, the digital process, the digital guardrails, as you call it, ensures that what it says on the tin is what is in fact in the box. And that was the problem we had with the global financial crisis, is that what it said in the tin of those collateralized mortgages was not in fact what was in the box of it, right? 80% of it were not AAA mortgages, but because of the digital guardrails, as you keep calling it, and because of the digitized platform that we have, because of the common rail that all the service providers have to follow, we have full line of sight from source to delivery of the integrity and the immutability of the data that goes into it, so that what it says in the tin is indeed what's in the box. And that's the goal of this process. So that's the second bit. That allows us to do something that I think very few people in the marketplace can do today, which is that it allows us, with a great deal of confidence and integrity, to create a forward purchase and sale marketplace for a very legitimate form of carbon credit, i.e., carbon credits that are generated from this asset class.
So, to quickly end it, um, I would just make a quick defense of nature-based solutions and the fact that they they will eventually. It's difficult. Rainforest is difficult to catch, but still, people are getting there, and we are actually Asad going to work on that too and see how we can, within plus or minus, get an accurate estimation. And let me tell you, even if we don't, today's nature-based solutions, the way it's being handled is far better than other areas where people claim to have total transparency and they don't, including Wall Street, including some of the goings on at the COP28. So just to say that in defense. Lastly, I want to close this session with an appeal. Given the fact how this COP28 is ending, right? I want to start a campaign to have the next COP on Zoom. There's absolutely no excuse for all of us flying there, private jets, converging to a location, only to end up the way this COP is ending. It's just like, it really, now, having said that, who knows, right now, they may have just worked out the whole solution and emission.
You might have just made yourself an enemy of the entire sustainability industry, because Dubai does throw a pretty good party.
Well, you know what? I think the next COP should be on Zoom. Anyway, with that thought, I will hand this whole thing, our session back to Geeta, who's managing us from the back, rapping on knuckles. So, Geeta, back to you. Thank you for arranging this session of the COP COP sessions. And Asad, thank you for your time. I'll see you soon.
Thanks.